All right, everyone, welcome to a special episode of the Walkoff. No Justin Randell here today, but we are joined with a very special guest, Anthony and my professor, David Kaplan. Professor, how are you doing today? It's
I'm
great.
doing well. Good to be with you guys.
Now, you have a long career, and as much as we would love to sum it up, I think everyone would love to hear you sum it up yourself.
Yeah, so as I think I told you guys in the beginning of the semester, I worked in something called newspapers, and that was really my dream when I was your age. I wanted to it was a glamorous industry back then in the 1970s, and I love sports. And after I graduated college, I was ultimately able to hook on with the Associated Press and then the New York Daily News as a Sunday sports editor back in the 80s and 90s. And really enjoyed it. Worked with some wonderful people. Newspapers were incredibly relevant and important. Back then, it was just before cable television, before the internet. And then I came to my proverbial fork in the road. I got involved in a project at Montclair State, which was right on the campus, the Yogi Berra Museum, back in the late 90s, 1998. And I became the founding director of the museum. Um, Worked there for close to 20 years, and I've been teaching on and off at Montclair State. So I've had kind of a varied career. I'm now working consulting on the new museum that will be operated by Montclair State at Hinchliffe Stadium in Paterson. And it is an exciting project and telling the story of the Negro Leagues and Larry Doby. So that's been a real focus of late. But yeah, just you never know which way career paths are going to take you guys. But I've been, really enjoyed working in sports media and and also in the museum world.
So I just as a Mets fan, I got to ask you this because I saw on your LinkedIn you started with Daily News June of '86. Now joining the Daily News in June of '86, what was it like? I mean, you're going right in the middle of an amazing New York season with the Mets, obviously covering the postseason. What was that like, and just some memories from the '86 season that you just joined the Daily News?
Yeah, Anthony, it was an incredible time. And I think that documentary really sums it up, Once Upon a Time in Queens, where the Mets, there was such a frenzy about, the Mets' success. We could not, as a newspaper, do more. We had about 5 or 6 people covering Met games at that time. I mean, we had a columnist, we had sidebar guys, we had the beat writers. Um, People writing on the opposing team. Um, it was just frenetic. There was the excitement in the city was just it was unmatched. And and then they had that incredible run in the postseason, playing the Astros, and then their remarkable win against the Red Sox. So there was unbelievable interest in the Mets, and the Daily News would, they have the Mets on the front page many days. There was that much excitement in the city about about the Mets back then.
Yeah, and I remember at a little towards the middle of the semester, you told us that you've worked with that at the Daily News. You got to work with guys like Stephen A. Smith and Michael Kay. Can
Right.
you talk a little bit about what kind of success you saw in them and how it was working with big names like this who were small at the time?
So the Daily News was really kind of a destination job in many ways. And there was also kind of this launching ground, I think, for a lot of people. Frank Isolo was our, our he actually covered the Mets, believe it or not, for one year as a beat writer, and then he became really well known in basketball. But there were so many really talented people that came through the news back then, and it was the high school department was a really big place for people to really make their name. So Stephen A. came to us as a young reporter from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where he went to school, and he got a job covering high school basketball, high school sports. Um, he uh, he knew Stephen A. was very, very ambitious and knew that he saw big things, for himself in sports media. But he went about things the right way. He got to know all the coaches. He got to really present himself, make a very favorable impression. Um, and he just wanted to get to the next level. People like Michael had an incredible work ethic. He was our Yankee beat reporter. Nobody outworked him. And he, even to this day, as a Yankee broadcaster, he has just kind of an unmatched, um, work ethic, a desire to get things right. Um, Built tremendous relationships through the years, and has always been, just a guy who is, just brought it all to the work that he's doing. Yeah, we had a lot of really talented people. Stephen A. and Michael were, in the high school department. There was a young woman named Tara Sullivan. She's now a Boston Globe sports columnist. Anthony uh, McCarron, who's now at SNY, was also in our high school sports department. So a lot of these people really went on to big things, but we had a very large staff. There were over 50 sports writers and editors at the Daily News back then. And you have to remember in the 80s and 90s, there was the Giants were winning 2 Super Bowls. The Rangers won the Stanley Cup for the first in 1994. The Knicks were making their run for the NBA championships. So there was such an excitement and the competition that we had with the other newspapers, with Newsday, with the New York Post, and even the New York Times. There was such a competitive fire back then that all our reporters did not want to get beat on a story. And it was really an amazing time in sports journalism. And I was really fortunate to be part of that at that time.
One of the things I was curious about is how you view newspapers in general, but the Daily News now as compared to
Mm.
when you worked there. And do you still read the Daily News, consume any of its content? What do you think about it now in 2023?
I don't think about it much at all, Anthony. I think it's sort of sadly it's hanging by a thread. It's under a paywall right now. I don't think the content is that they're using a lot of wire service stories. They don't have the resources really to cover sports the way they used to. I think the New York Post it seems like they're still in the 1980s. I mean, they have everything covered. They've got columnists. They've got every every New York team is really well serviced. So it's sad what's happened to the Daily News, but I think it's also kind of a reflective of the newspaper industry as a whole. It's really there's only been a few newspapers that have been able to figure out how to survive in this internet age, how to monetize their content. And the Daily News is not really, sadly, because of management and other issues, they've not been able to keep up.
And I'm interested to know how you think of sports media from the 80s until now. What has really happened to it?
Well, I think the internet and social media have had an amazingly profound effect. You know, the hot takes have become such a big thing now in sports media with these talk shows and things like that. Um, there are still a few outlets that really devote the resources to doing really good investigative journalism. We pride ourselves at the Daily News. We had people who would do some amazing investigative work. We would, allocate some the time and resources to do it right, to break big stories. But right now, it's a different landscape. It's a different atmosphere. You know, the .com boom has sort of gone, came and gone. But right now, it's who can be the loudest, who can be the most outrageous at times. I don't think sometimes sports journalism is overly well served by what's happening today. But there are some still amazing journalists out there who are doing fantastic work. All you have to do is look at some of these, people, for example, the ESPNs of the world, they have the resources to do some fantastic things.
What led you to move from newspapers to museum work, and what specifically Yogi Berra? What attracted you to the Yogi Berra aspect of things?
Yeah, so I was living in Montclair at the time, and I was a Sunday sports editor. The Daily News was going through a really rough time. They had overcome a bankruptcy in the early 90s. They also had kind of revolving door management. And I just sensed that they just weren't getting things figured out properly. So at that time, concurrently, the project at Montclair State was getting underway. Build a Yogi Berra Stadium on campus, would be home of the Jackals and the Montclair State baseball team, and then a gallery or museum would be fixed next to it. So the woman who was a trustee at the university, Rose Calley, who was sort of the driving force behind everything, had asked me to sort of help out on it, do a little bit of research for the museum where they want to make it kind of an education center. And I was gladly doing that on the side. And then one thing led to another, and she had asked me, would you want to run this museum? But we think you have the background, the connections to help get this thing going. And it was an interesting decision, but I felt it was really worthwhile. I was certainly going to save on the commute. Living in Montclair, I used to get stuck in the Lincoln Tunnel at 2 or 3 in the morning, and that wasn't too much fun. So to be associated with a baseball legend like Yogi Berra, who I knew very, very briefly, both of us living in Montclair and just seeing him at different events, but got to know him very, very well. It was an honor and a privilege to be connected with him, and then to help run the museum and promote his legacy was just was really a privilege.
Yeah, and you mentioned it a little bit there, but do you think you could expand on what it's like talking to a baseball legend like Yogi Berra?
Well, Yogi was everybody's favorite uncle. After a while, he is the most unassuming, unpretentious, celebrity you'll ever meet. He just became a really good friend, and just a dear man, very grounded, down to earth. He was obviously humbled beyond belief to have a museum named after him, but he really wanted to see it succeed. He wanted to have people go through there, learn about the history of baseball, learn about his career, and also just and to teach kids. And so we had a lot of programs there that dealt with sportsmanship, character education, learning how to do how to do sports the right way. But with Yogi, it was, at the same time, he kind of made his amends with the Yankees. He had a 14-year feud with George Steinbrenner, and the piece actually happened at the museum. It sort of helped it get us on the map. We had just been open for a month, and that became front page news, national news, really. George Steinbrenner came to the Yogi Berra Museum to, make amends with Yogi and apologize for the way he treated him 14 years earlier. And since that time, Yogi became a huge part of the Yankee family. He'd go down to spring training, and he was always, I would go with him to every homestand. He got to know the players. They really enjoyed his, presence, and he would offer advice and just kibitz with everybody, with the Jeters and Marianos of the world. And it was really a fun time, and I think it really enlivened him. He was a man in his 80s by then. He loved baseball. That was his whole life, and just to be connected again was a really, really big deal for him.
I thought the documentary "It Ain't Over," it's on
Yeah.
Netflix now. I thought that was really interesting. I was really surprised I saw you in it. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
How did that come about? And What was it like being involved in a documentary about someone obviously as revered as
Yeah.
Yogi Berra?
Well, Lindsay Berra, his granddaughter, gets all the credit in the world, and Lindsay and I have been very close through the years. We've talked about this. She appreciates that my job as a director was to promote his legacy and, keep you know keep the name alive. And I think the documentary sort of came to her by a filmmaker who said there's really hasn't been anything major done on your grandfather. There's been films done on Mr. Rogers and things like that. Why don't more people know on a national level know his story? There's a whole generation has grown up not really understanding what a misconception of Yogi Berra, because his public persona sort of overshadowed his greatness as a ball player. Yogi Berra's last year in baseball as a player was 1963, so you had to be over 60 years old to have seen him play. And that was Lindsay's big premise, is that his greatness as an athlete, as a Yankee, as a winner, was not fully appreciated because of his, personality, the yogiisms and all the commercials. That pop culture part of it sort of overshadowed his excellence as a baseball player.
And I'm interested to know how transitioning from the Yogi Berra Museum to the new museum in Patterson, what was the transition like, and is there anything that you're taking from the Yogi Berra Museum and bringing
Yeah, yeah. So definitely, it's a different type of museum. The focus is really going to be on the Negro Leagues and Larry Doby, and also the stadium as this popular gathering place for people in Patterson in the 30s and 40s. I mean, there was just all sorts of incredible events that were there. There were boxing matches, there was race car driving, there was these legendary Thanksgiving Day rivalry games between the two Patterson high schools where there close to 20,000 people would come. So we want to tell that story. And also the story of the Negro Leagues and Doby have been very underrepresented, I think, in our country. So this is a great way to educate young people about how race and the Negro Leagues played a role in, the beginning of the civil rights movement. And Larry Doby's is always overshadowed by Jackie Robinson, but in so many respects, he had it just as difficult, maybe even more so, as I, pointed out in class. That what he did was just, he blazed a trail for African Americans in this country.
Do you think Major League Baseball will ever truly recognize him? And do you think that maybe your project will help, hopefully one day, that can become a reality?
I hope so, Anthony. And also, the Baseball Hall of Fame this year will be doing a major exhibit to honor Black baseball called The Soul of the Game. I've been in contact with the people of the Hall of Fame, and we're hopeful to partner with them on, certain projects. But you saw in the last couple of years, Major League Baseball has incorporated the Negro Leagues into their official record and the official statistical record. So I think there's going to be a much more awareness about the Negro Leagues. There were over 20 Hall of Famers who played at Hinchley Stadium, and we're talking about Josh Gibson, uh, Coco, Cool Papa Bell, Monty Irvin, Larry Doby. So we want to tell that story in the museum, and I think it's. I know the Negro League Museum in Kansas City wants to also be associated with what's going on in Hinchley.
I was just going to ask about, I went to the museum in Kansas City a
Yeah.
couple of years ago. So I'm interested, how are you guys working together to make the museum?
So myself and the developer, Baye Adolfo Wilson, went down to Kansas City to meet with Bob Kendrick and tell them about what's happening in Patterson in North Jersey. And they are so interested. They want to have a number of smaller museums around the country to also promote the the story of the Negro Leagues and tell that story. So they are very engaged. I would not be surprised if, when the museum does open, Bob Kendrick will be there at the opening ceremony. He's an amazing storyteller, a great ambassador for the story of Black baseball. Um, and so I definitely see some joint, relationships with the Negro League Museum and also the Baseball Hall of Fame.
I was just about to ask that. Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, have they been a big help to you guys as you guys have been putting this all together?
They have. They have. They actually had an announcement at Hinchliffe Stadium in June that was going to promote, their exhibit as well. But I've just been in contact with, the president and folks there. They're very excited about what's happening at Hinchliffe, and they see this as a great cross-promotional opportunity as well.
Interesting. Interesting. Is there like a set date for the museum
Yeah,
to?
so the construction is underway. The stadium was, opened in last May. We're looking at February of next year.
Oh, exciting.
It's, things are moving along pretty well, but with construction and a lot of issues going on, there's not an exact date, but they're realistically looking at February of 2024.
This might be kind of a broad question, but what do you think is your most proudest, or at least what you would view as your best moment in your career, the moment you look back on and say, "Wow, I'm glad I really did that."
Oh gosh. Uh, I think having three daughters and seeing them do very well was my proudest moment. No, I'm not sure, Anthony. That's a really good question. I know, there were so many things we did at the museum that I was very, very proud of. The school programs, and then just some of the legends that came through the museum. It was really that was really exciting. When you have a guy like Sandy Koufax, you're doing a private tour with him and Yogi. That was really pretty awesome. The apology when George Steinbrenner came, that was a very tense moment. Yogi and him had not seen each other or talked to each other in 14 years. No one knew what was going to happen. And he was very, humbled and said, the way I treated you 14 years ago, the worst mistake I ever made in baseball. Could you see it in your heart to forgive me and, be part of the Yankees again? And so that was cool being part of that. And there's just there so many to name, but I will say, being associated with Yogi and considering him a really dear family friend. I mean, he went to my daughter's bat mitzvah, and him and Carmen were just a really cherished part of our lives. That to me was really, really, really special.
And I wanted to ask you, you've stayed close to baseball your entire career. And even
Right,
in our class, we always talked about baseball and we heard about Larry Doby
right.
and even the George Steinbrenner story. What led you to really stay so close with baseball?
Just being involved in sports. I think as I said, when I graduated college, I wanted to kind of combine my two loves, which were, writing and sports. So very fortunate to get jobs at two, very major institutions, the AP and the Daily News. Then being involved with the museum was really, you know, was about a baseball legend. So, you have to do what you can to promote those stories and to educate, the whole different generation. Baseball is going through a really rough time right now. It has not been able to engage younger people. Fewer and fewer young people are playing the sport. That's why you're seeing all these rule changes to make the game faster, make it more appealing. Um, they haven't done a great job of promoting their superstars. It's going to be really fascinating. And I know you guys want to talk about Yamamoto, but and Otani, but it's going to be interesting to see what baseball does to market these big stars and make them, and connect them to a younger generation the way the NBA and the NFL have done such an amazing job of doing that. So baseball has some big challenges. I love the game. It's our oldest sport. It tells the story of its country better than any other sport. It was at the forefront of social justice and civil rights. So there's so many great lessons to be learned by baseball, and it just it's still a game that I grew up with and I still love, even though it's not you know something I live and die with the way I did when I was younger. But it's still to me it is America's pastime.
I'm curious to hear what you think about this unprecedented money we've seen being spent. The
Yeah.
Dodgers spending over $1 billion this offseason. Some people say it's good for the game. Some people say, oh, complete, it's terrible for other small teams like the A's. Where do you stand on that? How do you feel about all this money being spent?
Well, I'm a little mixed. I think it's exciting. Sports have done very, very well when you have this one incredibly dominant team, when you have a dynasty in sport. That's what the Dodgers are, beckoning to become, a dynasty. I mean, yeah, hockey did not exactly suffer when the Montreal Canadiens were dominating, and baseball was still going really, really well in the late 40s and 50s when the Yankees were, winning every single year. The Boston Celtics, you know, didn't really hurt the NBA when they were winning like crazy in the 60s and the Lakers in the 80s. So it's really kind of fun to see this incredibly dominant team with stars. I think it's great for sports and competition in general. The money's just crazy. It's just nuts. How it's insane. How can you uh, how can you say otherwise? That said, um, I think it does create an amazing buzz, amazing attention, excitement, and I think we'll see that, throughout the coming baseball season with these two unbelievable superstars making, you know, just just funny money.
And I there's been so many superstars now in the MLB today that have really come from Japan and from
Right.
outside of the country to play the game that we all know. So I'm interested to know how you've seen the sport develop from an international standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, the globalization of baseball is a great story. It's exciting. I think that's why the NBA has just really gone to a new level as well. I mean, so many of their amazing players are from Europe. Um, but baseball is, to me, the most democratic of all games. I mean, these, poor kids from Latin America can become, baseball stars, baseball legends. The thing that does concern me and that concerns a lot of people is African Americans are not growing up with the game of baseball, and there's never been fewer black players in the major leagues as there is right now. I mean, back in the 70s, almost, over one out of every four players was a black player. Now it's like, 7%. Um, so baseball has some challenges ahead. How to market the game, how to make it even more inclusive and to minority populations. Uh, but I think the fact that you have this diverse group of athletes is really exciting. It's really cool. That's what I love about hockey too. Is you've got American players, you got Canadian players, you got European players. It's really kind of fun I think it's great for the sport that you have so many different ethnicities, you know, rising to a high level and playing the sports at the standard that they're playing it at.
You mentioned one of the things that baseball's been doing has been, changing all these rules, pitch clock and everything. Actually, this week they tweaked them a little bit more. I mean, they
Yeah.
put down the pitch clock from 20 seconds to 18 with no runners on base. Do you think that these rules need to keep getting changed? Should there be more time to see how these rules that were only implemented a year ago, should they get more time to breathe, or is this a good thing for baseball? Do people really want to see shorter and shorter games?
I think a little of both, Anthony. I think that people want to see a little bit shorter games. I mean, going to a baseball game and sitting there for 4 hours is not anybody's idea of fun. Um, that said, I agree with you. I think they should let these new rules a little chance to breathe a little bit. See, I'm not quite sure why they're taking these little extra measures, but I guess the competition committee feels that this is in the best interest of the game, and they're going to make these changes and see where it goes. Um, But overall, I think it was very well received. I think the fact that these unnecessary uh, things, about changing the pitcher and the length between pitches. These are things that I guess can constantly be modified, and hopefully, they've got it down right now. But I think overall, it's been a positive change.
We got to talk to an MLB player prior to the season
Wow.
about what he thought about the rules
Yeah.
in the game, and he seemed a little. He said that that's not really baseball.
Yeah.
No, that's not how it's supposed to be played. And I'm wondering how you thought from kind of a reporter side,
Yeah.
being so close to the game that you are, uh, what you thought of the rules in the first season.
I thought generally they were good. I think baseball real recognized it did have a problem. I think a lot of purists and traditionalists in the former player you spoke to, I mean, they've known only one thing. They've only known one way of playing the game. So I think baseballs have been very resistant to change. It's one of the sports that just doesn't, look at the NFL. They're always constantly modifying their rules, trying to make it safer. Um, so I think baseball has taken a very hard look at itself. Why have we declined a little bit in popularity? How can we get back? How can we bring fans in, bring in more fans? How can we be a little bit more television friendly? So I think overall they're addressing what is one of their problems, the length of the games. This is the biggest issue, I think, when you talk about a younger generation. They find baseball very, very boring and slow. So I think that's what these rules are designed to address.
Do you think Rob Manfred's the guy to make all those changes, or do you think that he's maybe a guy that should be ousted and maybe another guy come in and really make those changes that the game needs?
Well, the funny thing about Rob Manfred is I don't think I think at the end of the day, he's a businessman and he's a lawyer. His biggest mission, I think, is to make the owners money. They're the ones he has to report to them. Um, I don't think that he has the absolute passion and love of the game as other commissioners, a guy like a Bart Giamatti or Fay Vincent had. Um, so he's a business guy. He's a lawyer. I think one of the worst things that he did, and I'll never forgive him for this, is that he retrenched the minor leagues. To me, minor league baseball is how you grow baseball. You are present in small communities. You become more accessible, affordable for families. And then by cutting out 40 minor league teams, I thought he did the sport a grave injustice.
And
But again, it was in the interest of making more money for the owners.
I we also saw Rob Manfred this year say that the Brewers need to like fix their stadium or else, but we have seen him say nothing at all to the A's organization. And
Yeah.
you got to see the A's when they were a really good team with Ricky Henderson there and some great players coming in out. Now seeing that the A's will be moving in 2 years after this year, um, I'm just interested to know what you think of the A's and what's going on over there.
Well, Vince, I think that was a grossly mishandled situation, and Manfred's not one of Rob Manfred's proudest moments. I mean, the Oakland A's. I mean, unfortunately, that organization has a history of packing up and moving. I mean, they were in Philadelphia, they were in Kansas City, they were in Oakland, now Vegas. But I think the owner, this guy, can't remember his name, but he should have been forced to sell the team. He really should have. I think the city definitely wanted to build a stadium, but not on this guy's terms. Something could have been worked out. It's a great market. There's so much history there. There's so much interest. When the A's were playing well, people came. But that stadium has been neglected. It's awful. Um, I think Manfred should have forced you know a new owner to take over that team and stay in Oakland. But that ship has sailed. They're going to move to Vegas, like a lot of you know we've seen the Raiders move there. We've seen the success of the Golden Knights. It's a great sports market, but Rob Manfred did not handle this very, very well at all.
Do you ever really see baseball being king in terms of all these leagues again, like it was 40, 50 years ago, or do you think it's kind of doomed in the next few decades?
I don't know about doomed. I don't think it's going to reclaim its stature as the number one sport in this country. I mean, it's hard to, even comprehend how dominant the sport of baseball was in the 50s, and even in the 60s, where, the World Series were played at, during the day, and the whole country kind of stopped, and watched it. Those days have passed. Those days are gone. I think it's gotten a little too gimmicky, with the expanded playoffs and things like that. You got a team that was decent in the regular season, and those like the Arizona Diamondbacks, and all of a sudden they're fighting for the world championship. I think the regular season should really count for a lot more. But I just think that baseball's been a little slow. I think the other two sports have really surpassed them in terms of marketing, in terms of fan appeal, and baseball has huge challenges, but they're exciting challenges too. I think you know, as it turned out, they had a pretty good year attendance wise overall. The challenge is going to be just trying to make it competitive, and people in cities like Pittsburgh, they shouldn't be doomed from day one. How can we make these small market teams, competitive? It's going to be really tough from a financial standpoint, certainly.
Um, I I mean, Anthony, is there any more questions from you?
I I'm just curious as to like what do you think about these New York teams where they're at now? Just I know you're a New York guy. You've
Yeah.
worked with
Yeah.
the Daily News, worked with Yogi Berra, obviously a New York player. Mets and Yankees, do you really see them winning in these next couple of years? Do you see them falling off even more? Where do you see
Yeah,
them?
no, they are because they have the resources. They're always going to be competitive. I mean, the Steinbrenner family is still going to have an enormous payroll. The New York Yankees, they have an expectation that they're playing for the World Series every year. New York City is a great, great baseball market. I mean, it supported three teams for decades, uh, and we saw that. You guys asked me about what it was like in the '86 Mets. I mean, if the Mets were, can get back to that level of excellence, I mean, you're going to see 3 million people, at least at Citi Field. They've got great ballparks. Um, they've got the financial wherewithal to become competitive. Um, but I think that, I think the Mets are a little bit in a retooling stage. I think the Yankees will be really, really fun to watch with Soto and Judge and Jarrett Cole. They've got some holes to fill, but come spring, you're going to see all the big buzz and excitement again, and people are going to, fill the talk radio about the Yankees and Mets, as it has been for years and years.
Well, Professor, I want to thank you so much for coming on the walk-off. It meant so much to the both of us.
Oh,
And
my pleasure.
and
Great having you guys in class too, and I commend you for doing this podcast. This is awesome.
Thank you.
I wish you nothing but the best. And I just have a quick question for you guys though. As baseball fans, where do you see the sport?
I I see it kind of never being what it once was. I really hope that it could compete with the NBA. But I don't know. I think eventually it's really going to be one of those bottom of the barrel sports. And it really pains me to say that because I love baseball, by far my favorite sport. I just, unless things really change quickly with Major League Baseball as it is with the commissioner and the commissioner's office as it is as a whole, marketing these guys. I mean, best example to me is Otani announcing his signing on Instagram with the LA Dodgers picture. That should be national, worldwide news. Should have been handled better, in my opinion. But unless things really change, I just don't see it ever being what it was even 10, 15 years ago.
yeah,
What
I
about you,
agree.
Vince? What's
I
that?
I agree with Anthony. I love the game of baseball, but I go to games and even I know that sometimes it can be extremely slow, even with the new rules. But I would hope that it gets better. I think the marketing aspect, just like Anthony said, needs to get so much better. The Otani thing was incredibly underwhelming. and I was expecting like an explosion of something, and it felt like nothing happened. It felt like it was just, second page news.
Almost like an afterthought, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would hope it could get back to the point it was. But I think if something's going to happen, it's going to get a little bit worse before it gets any better.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what also has got to happen is that the Players Association, the Players Union, has a very fractious relationship with the ownership, and they can't get on the same page with things. That's why you guys are completely right. There should have been an enormous buzz about this free agency period, the way there is with the NBA and all the other sports. And you're right. It was sort of like, oh, what are they doing? Nobody really, But again, these are the rules that have been set up. And, this is the most powerful players union, in all sports, the baseball union. So, they have some incredible agents who kind of drive the sport, the Scott Boris's of the world. But so there's a lot of stuff that has to happen for baseball to really get back and, you know, get where it was. But it's so, like you said, you guys, I love the fact that you guys are relatively young and you grew up with baseball, you love the game, and you want to see it get to where it was.
I'm actually interested. I have one more question for you, Professor.
Sure.
For anyone who's listening to the show or anyone who wants to really do what you did in your career, what kind of advice would you have for them?
Yeah. I always tell young people just be as adaptable, versatile, flexible as possible. I mean, the media landscape has changed so much. I mean, when I was growing up, the way you got into newspapers was you had to work as a clerk or you had to work in a small town paper before you moved to a city paper. That no longer exists. Right now, there's so many different media outlets and there's so many ways that the media works. So if you guys can be as well versed in podcasting, doing videos, writing, just writing roundups, just be as adaptable as you can. That said, develop a passion. You guys already have that passion, and just become an absolute expert in the area that you want to cover. And that's basically it. Just don't say no to things. Try new things, and just be open to anything because the media landscape is just changing so much. Um, when I was in newspaper, the internet did not exist, as hard as that to believe. And now, it's a huge part of anybody's, media experience. They have to be, they have to know how to, put things out on social media. They have to do, certain videos, little clips. So I just would advise you guys, learn as much as you can, be adaptable, and if there's people that you admire, in the field, just follow them and see if you can make a connection with them, ask advice, and just see how they got to where they are. You brought up Stephen A. at the very early beginning. I mean, Stephen A. probably never, in 1992 or 91 when he was working with us at the Daily News, I don't think he saw that he was going to be, the highest paid person in sports media or that he was going to be, driving the sports conversation on talk shows like, First Take. That said, he understood that reporting, being prepared, working hard was something that was timeless, and that was going to take him to where he wanted to go. So from the Daily News, he went to Philadelphia, become a columnist, became an absolute expert in the NBA, developed some great relationships, and he had a great personality, had some charisma, and it served him very, very well. But bottom line is he was a really hard worker. Um, he was very well prepared on what he was talking about, and he had a great command of, the message he wanted to give out there.
Well, I just also want to say thank you because I think you're one of those connections that hopefully we could use as we
Absolutely.
grow.
Anything I can do to help, you know where to find me.
And we appreciate you just coming on this podcast and talking with us. And we hope people really check out Yogi Berra's documentary. It ain't over Netflix and Hinchcliffe
Yeah.
Stadium in Patterson. You're doing a lot of great things with baseball. So should be proud of what you're doing. And thank you again for coming on our podcast.
And you guys should be proud as well. Congratulations on the podcast, and just be as well versed as possible, and just keep working really, really hard.
Thank you so much, Professor. It means a lot.
Okay. Take care, guys.
Take care.
Okay. Enjoy the holidays.
You
You
too.
too.